Imagine a clock ticking toward economic chaos. Cargo ships, heavy with goods, waiting in foreign ports. Retailers at home staring at half-empty shelves. The world's most powerful economies, locked in a high-stakes staring contest. And then, just hours before the breaking point, a pen scratches across paper in the Oval Office. One signature halts the collision course. Markets stop trembling. Oil prices breathe again. It's not a victory. Not yet. It's a pause. 90 days of fragile calm between two titans whose next move could redefine the global order. On August 11, 2025, President Donald Trump made a move that stunned both supporters and critics. In a single, deliberate stroke of the pen, he extended the fragile U.S.-China tariff truce for another 90 days. Without this intervention, the financial shock would have been swift and brutal. Tariffs on Chinese imports were set to leap from an already punishing 30% to a suffocating 145%. Beijing had promised retaliation of equal ferocity, raising duties on American goods from 10% to a staggering 125%. The stage was set for a full-scale economic confrontation, one that could have rattled industries, crippled supply chains, and sent tremors through markets worldwide. Trump's public justification echoed his familiar rallying cry, "America first." It was framed as a defense of U.S. jobs, a shield for national security, and a chance to secure a better deal. But beneath the rhetoric, the decision was tactical. This wasn't about victory. It was about survival. The extension bought precious time. Time for negotiators to search for common ground. Time for businesses to adjust supply orders. And time to prepare for a possible high-stakes meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping later in the year. The countdown, however, had already begun. Beijing wasted no time in matching Washington's move, announcing within hours that it too would extend the tariff truce. Chinese officials confirmed that duties on American goods would remain at the existing 10%, shelving plans for the punishing 125% hikes that had been prepared as retaliation. The decision was as much about optics as economics. Behind closed doors, Chinese trade envoys met their U.S. counterparts in Stockholm and Geneva. The agenda was daunting: dismantling non-tariff barriers, negotiating intellectual property safeguards, and redefining market access rules that had stalled for years. Every handshake, every word was weighed for political messaging at home and abroad. Publicly, China's language was measured and conciliatory. Officials spoke of positive outcomes and a partnership grounded in equality and mutual respect, a subtle reminder that Beijing would not bow to pressure. Privately, the calculus was sharper. The leadership understood that a sudden tariff surge could choke exports, unsettle manufacturing hubs, and risk domestic backlash at a politically sensitive moment. For now, the weapons of the trade war were placed back in their cases, but no one in Beijing or Washington believed they had been dismantled. They were simply waiting for the next order to fire. The truce landed like a lifeline for U.S. retailers preparing for the holiday shopping season. From national chains to niche toy importers, businesses had been bracing for cost spikes that would have gutted margins and pushed prices sky high for consumers. The pause at 30% tariffs offered clarity, temporary clarity, but enough to place orders, stock shelves, and plan promotions without the looming specter of economic whiplash. Ports that had feared a slowdown instead kept humming, unloading shipments that might have been stranded in foreign harbors. For Beijing, the benefits were just as immediate. The suspension of new duties meant export channels to the U.S. remained open. Factories avoided sudden cancellations. Markets steadied. And perhaps most importantly, the leadership avoided the optics of being economically cornered, preserving the narrative of China as an equal, never a subordinate, in global trade. The reaction was swift. Oil prices ticked upward as fears of a demand crash eased. Brent and WTI crude both posted modest gains. Asian equities rallied, especially in manufacturing-heavy economies tied to the US-China supply chain. Investors, sensing a reprieve, re-entered the market. For one day, the global mood shifted from dread to cautious relief. This 90-day extension was far more than an economic pause. It was a strategic inflection point in the global balance of power. In the grand theater of geopolitics, trade is never just about goods and tariffs. It's about influence, alliances, and the unspoken rules that shape the modern world. By holding back from escalation, Washington and Beijing did more than freeze a conflict. They reshaped its trajectory. For the first time in months, the world saw a faint outline of coexistence, rather than an inevitable spiral toward economic decoupling. Ports that only days earlier braced for paralysis now pulsed with activity. Cranes swung steel containers into place. Shipping manifests, once uncertain, were confirmed. In corporate boardrooms from New York to Singapore, strategies were torn up and rewritten. Supply chains were recalculated, investment flows reconsidered, contingency plans shelved. For now. Yet beneath the relief, another truth lingered. The rules are changing. In an era when billion-dollar contracts can just as easily be signed in Mandarin as in English, America faces a question it hasn't seriously confronted in decades. What happens if the world learns to trade without it? This truce is not peace. It is a countdown. And the clock has already started. Trade is never just an exchange of goods. It is the language through which nations project power, forge trust, and wield leverage. On August 11, 2025, the United States did not surrender, nor did it lose the trade war. But it revealed something critical. The margins for error are now razor-thin. In that fleeting moment, America still stood in its place within the global order. Yet, like a shadow at dusk, the faint outline of a world without unquestioned U.S. dominance appeared. History shows that superpowers rarely collapse in an instant. They are replaced quietly, through 1,000 subtle shifts. One agreement, one alliance, one signature at a time. The question now is whether America can stop that clock. Is this how superpowers fade? Through silence, not shock? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this video, and subscribe. This story isn't over yet.